Okay, welcome to Geoff Chang, who is the General Manager of the Mark Morris Dance Group. Thank you very much for joining us today and giving us your advice, tips about your career in the arts. Thank you.
Very happy to be here, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, they say there are no standard structured career paths in the arts, but yours is unusual. From classics degree at Cambridge via city lawyer to general manager of a dance group. Firstly, can you give us a little brief bit of background about how all that came about?
Sure. Well, I would say, although it does seem unusual, there was a lot of intentionality and purpose in my career path. So at Cambridge, I was very involved in the arts. I sang in my college choir. I performed with several student productions. And I had a passion for all dance forms, dance, theatre, opera, museums. And so I always felt that this was an area that was calling me professionally. During the sort of career rounds that came in my final year of Cambridge, I wasn't really sure how to enter that field. And so I just approached a group of theatre companies in London and asked if I could do some work experience, which I did. My first work experience was at the Rambert Dance Company, which is the leading contemporary dance group, then based in Chiswick, now on the South Bank next to the National Theatre. And after a few months in that role, I was offered a full-time position. So I was assisting the artistic and executive directors, which was a brilliant entry-level position in the field, because essentially I got to see how the entire organization works from all different viewpoints. While I was working in that role that year, I really got to see how the law really impacted the dance fields. Partly for two reasons. Firstly, the organization was going through a capital campaign, so it was moving premises from Chiswick, as I mentioned, to the South Bank. So I was liaising with property lawyers, planning specialists, fundraisers. And concurrently, we were going through quite a tricky employment dispute. And so there were sort of legal meetings that I was sitting in on and taking meetings. And so those two incidents really sort of sparked my interest in trying to learn more about the law. One of our board members at the time was a lawyer, and he offered me some work experience at his law firm and gave me advice that I may want to consider training as a lawyer, getting some experience in the field as a lawyer, and then moving back into the arts with that knowledge. And so that was always the plan, and that's what I did. I worked for a law firm called Allswang, which has now merged, but at the time it was the leading media entertainment law firm. And so many of my clients were in the creative fields, the BBC, advertising agency, Cameron McIntosh, the West End producer, his company was one of my clients. While I was also at this law firm, I really sort of volunteered my time in the arts. So I did some work pro bono for the Royal Opera House. And I joined the board of a dance company in Manchester, Company Chameleon, which I actually still sit on, advising them on employment regulations, on any kind of contract disputes they may have. And after several years in the law, I realized I really missed the arts and really wanted to go back in full time. So I started reaching out to people I knew in the field, looking for jobs. And I also broadened my search outside of London because I was traveling to New York quite a lot. My brother lived there. I have a ton of friends. I would go on holiday a few times a year. And just through networking, actually a friend from Cambridge met someone at a dinner party in Manhattan who is a choreographer, and he was looking for someone to help him build his business, build his dance company. So I came over to New York, had a coffee with him, and the rest is history. I moved over to New York, and I've been there now for 6 years, running the dance company that my friend introduced me to.
Wow, what a career trajectory. You make that last bit sound very easy, but I know that for a UK national, it can be a real challenge to get the right to work in the US, especially working in sectors like the arts. How did you achieve that?
You're absolutely right, Catherine. It was really, really difficult, particularly with the current administration in the US, which are not that supportive of people outside the country coming in. So initially, I worked free for 3 months. I took a big risk, a big leap, and I was prepared to support myself while I tried to get a full-time paid position legally. But at the beginning, I wasn't able to do that simply. While I was working in New York, because I was at an educational institution at the time, it was for actually a dance school, I was able to get a visa connected to that. It's called an F1 visa. And through meeting, again, I guess if there's one takeaway everyone can have from my talk today, it's the importance of networking and forming relationships, because I really sought out immigration attorneys in New York, and I met someone quite soon after moving who's really sort of been a huge support to me. So after that sort of F1 educational visa, which I mentioned, I was able to get onto what's called an H1B. It's the sort of next best thing to a green card. And essentially, it allows people from abroad who have a skill, and I'm sure everyone who's gone to Cambridge will be eligible for this type of visa, to come to the States and to use the skills which they've gained in their degree in their job. So there was a little creativity in my visa application. I won't go into all the details of and minutiae in that, but essentially I was able to show that my bachelor's in classics, analytical, good writing, problem solving, I was able to use those transferable skills in my job as a dance company manager.
Okay, thank you. So as a general manager of a dance company, what does a typical day look like for you? What kind of activities are you doing daily?
Sure. Well, I'd say there are two types of days, Catherine. The first day is when we're in the dance studio in our building in New York. And the second type of day is when we're on the road, when we're on tour, because essentially that's how we generate most of our revenue, through performing at venues across New York, across the country, and across the world. So let's look at both of those individually. When we're in the studios, I look after the dance group. So I and my team will make sure that the dancers are all set and ready for rehearsals throughout the day. Typically, our 20 dancers start off with a 90-minute ballet class from 10 to 11:30. They then have a short break for an early lunch, and then they rehearse throughout the afternoon. So I'll make sure that the musicians who are going to be attending those rehearsals are set up, that the production team who arrange the logistics for the dance studios, everything's in order. And once that's taken care of, then I can get on with my work at my desk. I do a lot of fundraising, so I will be writing a grant application. I'll be liaising with our high-end donors to perhaps invite them to rehearsal, just to keep them abreast of what's going on with the company. And my role as general manager is really sort of a broad role that oversees and has a relationship with all different departments. So like most organizations, we have a marketing team, fundraising, education, production, and I'll be liaising all those throughout the day. My main role, I would say, though, is contracting and negotiating deals for the company. So almost every day I'm in conversations with venue owners, what we call presenters, across the country and across the globe, scheduling in the following year or 2 years ahead for them to bring my dance company to their venue, what fee they'll pay us, what educational ancillary activities we can offer, the scheduling, the travel, the hotel, all those logistics. That's the sort of main part of my day. And then the second part of my answer is what my day is like on tour. So in some ways quite similar. On tour, the dancers will begin their day rehearsing, and then they'll perform, although they'll perform on the stage in costume. I might be getting a photographer to come take some photographs for press. I will have some donors coming to the performance that I will need to look after. Usually there's a production office at the theatre where I'll be doing all the kind of work which I mentioned earlier, but essentially just getting ready for the evening's show. So making sure that everything's going smoothly, that the dancers are all in good health, there are no injuries, everyone's set to go, that the costumes are in order, the lighting designer knows what he or she is doing, and making sure that that evening's performance goes seamlessly.
Fantastic, really varied.
It is very varied, yes.
Really varied. Presumably, the quarantine and restrictions that are in place at the moment have significantly affected your day-to-day life.
Well, I'd say it's devastated and impacted, the field as a whole. And as I mentioned, we generate revenue through touring, so none of that has happened. I think particularly for dancers, it's been very difficult, Catherine, because they're so used to working together and to moving. They're not, say, a violinist or an oboe player who can, use this time at home to really sort of master their art and rehearse. They live, especially in New York, people live in very small apartments, often with several flatmates. And so a big part of my job has just been checking in on the mental health and physical health of my 20 dancers, making sure that they are in good spirits, that they're staying optimistic and hopeful. We do run classes via Zoom, which has been a challenge, but has now become a bit more normalized. Every day there's sort of Pilates or strength classes that my dancers can do to try and stay in good health. But my sort of admin work has really shifted to a real focus on fundraising, because without any earned revenue, and just to clarify for people listening, there are two strands of revenue that an arts organization gets. There's earned, so ticket sales, sort of merchandise, and then there's contributed, which is fundraising through individual donors or through the government or foundations that give money to the arts, kind of like the Arts Council in the UK. So I've really focused on trying to raise those funds through applying to as many foundations as I can, through keeping our donors and our members informed and asking them to be generous. And the other thing that I focused on is real advocacy for our field, because the government, I guess, you know, as many people know, don't give as much as we would like. And we've really tried to sort of explain through data and qualitative research what benefits and impacts the arts has on the economy and on livelihoods, and really sort of being a spokesperson for the field to try and help get more funds that way.
Yeah, good luck. I hope you're successful.
Thank you
very much. What do you go to something a bit more upbeat? What do you enjoy the most about your job?
There are loads of things that I love about my job, but I think what I love most is the people I work with. You know, I have been so fortunate, Catherine, to work alongside some of the leading conductors, musicians, singers in the world. Just naming a few, if you don't mind me name dropping. Yo-Yo Ma, the great cellist, he collaborates a lot with us, wonderful musician. Stephanie Blythe, the mezzo-soprano, has also performed with us. And we tour to some of the most wonderful venues around the globe. I'm thinking the Kennedy Center, the largest performing arts center in North America. Last year, I went to Australia for the Melbourne Arts Festival with a group of musicians and singers from Azerbaijan. It was a real collaborative, cross-cultural performance. And so being able to be alongside these incredibly talented musicians and dancers and singers in these incredible venues is probably the thing I enjoy the most.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And what do you find the most challenging? Okay, what do you find the most challenging about your role?
Working in the arts, we often have a lack of resources. And so there are many menial administrative tasks that I will have to look after myself on a day-to-day basis. You know, I don't have my own personal assistant who can help me with photocopying and printing. And when you're having a really busy day, that can be a challenge, having to do all those additional tasks as well. Also, this might seem like I'm contrasting what I just said previously, but working with so many creative individuals, there's sometimes challenging personality types that I will need to manage. People are very passionate and care deeply about what they do. And so understandably at times that passion can turn into, you know, difficult personality types. So that is often something I have to, you know, challenge, you know, work with.
I remember that well from my time at the arts as well. It's fun. It makes for good anecdotes anyway. Now, there are an increasing number of postgraduate courses in the arts in cultural management and administration. Do you think these are a good idea? Do they actually prepare you for the realities of life in the arts? Or are they the icing on the cake that you don't necessarily need?
Catherine, that's a really, really good question. And I'm not entirely sure. I would say from my perspective, the most important thing I look for when I'm recruiting is work experience. And so I just think even if you have a postgraduate degree, that doesn't beat, you know, actually experience on the job. I'm sure in any field it might be similar, right? You can, you know, I trained as a lawyer, but, you know, so many of the sort of cases I learned at law school weren't relevant when I'm actually in the middle of a deal. So I think if it's a concern with finance, there are some really great free or affordable professional development courses. You know, I didn't do a postgraduate degree, but I did, you know, some evening classes at NYU in New York on fundraising, management, finance, which are really, really beneficial and useful. So I would say try and get the experience first. If you can find some short courses that aren't that expensive or time consuming, or some professional development, that would be really great. Ultimately, what it does is show an employer your real passion and your commitment to the field.
Yeah, work experience is paramount. First, starting with putting on events while you're at university and then going on to get work experience outside. Obviously, that is really, really hard to do at the moment. So what would your advice be to students to keep those skills bubbling along and try and get some work experience at the moment?
So I mentioned this earlier, and I'll say it again. It's really important to network. And I think this is something that perhaps in America, people are a little bit more comfortable with than perhaps in the UK. But I certainly, every so often, get an email from someone I don't know who's a university student or a recent grad, just asking if they can talk to me for half an hour. And I'm always willing to do that. So I would say to people, why don't you just spend some time on LinkedIn, research organizations, and find people who you really find interesting, have a sort of career background that you'd like to learn more about. Maybe reach out to them, because those are the kind of people, once you form that connection, that they can offer you work experience when things open up again. I also think that there is so much that can be done. I don't think I know. There is so much that can be done virtually and digitally now. I've seen lots of creative performances done virtually on Zoom. So there's no reason why someone cannot produce something on Zoom. That can still be put on your resume. You can still be connecting with people in different cities across the UK and putting on a play, putting on a sort of concert. So that's where you're still gaining skills. You're learning to schedule, you're reaching out to audience members to sort of market the event through social media. All the same skills that you can gain in the real world, in real time, can also be gained online, digitally, I think. Yeah.
When you're recruiting, you've mentioned that you look for work experience. Are there any particular key skills and attributes that you specifically look for? And part of that is, are there any skills that have gone up in your estimation during COVID that you really, really look for now?
Yeah. Firstly, it is passion for the arts. You've got to show a real commitment and a love for this field. It's challenging. Compensation isn't always great. And you really need to make the person who's looking at your CV and cover letter believe that you are really, really interested and committed to this field. I think, particularly in America, but also in the UK, fundraising, I've mentioned this a lot, fundraising is so key. If you can show that you have perhaps worked on your May Ball committee and managed to get some free flowers for the hall, or if you've been involved in a production at the ADC and you've managed to get a discount through printing the programs, anything that shows that you are really aware of the income stream and the revenue and how money can be saved, that's really, really impressive to me, because there's a bottom line. And if you're aware of that from the outset, it's very impressive. You know, Catherine, I would say one more thing, and we're going through an interesting time in America particularly, but all across the world, with the Black Lives Matter and social justice movement. And like in many professions, it's unfortunately not very ethnically diverse at the top of the field. And so I really want to encourage people of color to come within the arts. And one thing we really noticed is that I was fortunate that I was able to do unpaid work experience because I was able to be supported through my parents for those first few months. But many people cannot do that. And it's often people of color, black and brown, men and women, who cannot afford to do unpaid work experience. So as an organization, we are now committed, and many people in the field have committed to always paying work experience students and interns. But I would just say, if there are people listening to this who are, people of color, ethnic minorities, we particularly want to get those kind of people into the field, particularly at senior levels.
Fantastic. That's a great initiative. And the more arts organisations that can pay for work experience, the better. This is a natural place to actually plug the Career Service Summer Bursary Scheme, which is to enable people to do work experiences that they would otherwise be unable to afford to do. And it's up to £500 to support people who can't afford to do these unpaid experiences. So if you're a student watching this, look out for these. They are still running despite COVID. and the deadline is around June. So look out for those when we get around to that point again.
That's a great initiative. Yeah.
Thank you. Finally, COVID has obviously had a massive impact across the creative industries, across the sector. Would you advise people to keep trying the arts now, or to follow in your footsteps and maybe try another sector first and gain some transferable skills whilst keeping their passion for the arts alive, and then transfer in once the world has settled down a little bit?
You know, it's a really personal decision, and I do think that there are more entry-level jobs than there are more senior jobs. Yeah. So I do think, although I'm sure it's extremely challenging and difficult for anyone looking for a job now, for people at a more junior position, I wouldn't be too afraid with sticking with the arts now, because actually there's so much potential to learn during this time. Being able to see how a company like mine is weathering the storm, the challenges that we face, the creative solutions, I think that will be a really impactful way for people to learn. So if you really are committed to the arts and want to go in now and don't want to do anything else, go for it. I don't think you should be worried about COVID. At the same time, you know, you can never have enough skills. So if there are other ways that you can gain these transferable skills, and a job comes available to you in a slightly different sector, by all means, don't feel that that is shutting the door, because look at my background, it certainly didn't shut the door at all. So my answer is kind of either is fine, whichever works for you and whatever feels right for you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for giving us your time today. It's early in the morning for you, early-ish, but not for us. So thank you very much, Geoff, for your time, your advice and your insights.
Thank you for letting me come.